math, he was a genius. And the way I can be certain in that statement was because of the following. So there's another Persian, his name is Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina says to us that I read Aristotle 40 times. Now, he didn't read Aristotle 40 times. We actually don't know how many times he read it. I read Aristotle 40 times was an idiom. It meant I memorized Aristotle word for word. When he said I read Aristotle 40 times, what he meant was, you can tell me the politics, page 5, third chapter, and he could tell it to you word for word. He had the text memorized in his head. He said, after saying this, I don't know what it says. I'm sure there's some incredible genius here. I can't tap into it. The words don't make sense. The reason the words didn't make sense was they were idiomatic. That is to say, Aristotle taught in idioms. Well, he taught in idioms that by the 1st century AD were now 1,000 years old. And even the Greeks didn't know those idioms. So it wasn't like the Arabs could go to the Greeks and go, dude, what does this idiom mean? Because the language had evolved and those idioms were forgotten. So whether you read it in the original Greek or you read it in Al-Kindi's translation, either way, you still didn't know what the idioms meant. Nobody did. Even the Greeks couldn't read Aristotle. And so they're stumped. They don't know what to do. And Ibn Sina goes, I know there's a genius in here. I got to tap into it. How do I tap into it? One day he's in the book section of the bazaar and he passes by a book. And it says, it's written by Farabi. It says, Al-Farabi's idiomatic translation of Aristotle. Al-Farabi would read an idiom, try to guess what it meant. He'd plug it in, see if it worked. If it didn't work, he'd come back, try a different one. And he kept doing this until he decoded the idioms. And he realized what each idiom meant. And now you could know Aristotle and what he was saying. Ibn Sina reads this, figures out what the idioms are. He already has the text memorized. Ibn Sina suddenly, instantly knows Aristotle. And he goes nuts. What he realizes is that Aristotle is on to something about the nature of the universe. So, Aristotle says, so I guess I have to tell you what Plato says. Plato says that there's 3 realities. There's the reality we experience. So this floor, that wall, the chair, my suit, me. But that's not the real. The realer real is what's in my head. So my imagination of a chair is realer than an actual chair. My understanding of the wall is better than the actual wall. And he goes, but that's not the real either. Reality exists in a plane of existence that he calls the forms, or the idios. And so what happens is, if I'm going to make a chair, my mind reaches up into the idios, grabs the true chair, brings it into my head, but it's a copy. Copy is never as good as the original. And then my hands take the copy in my head and make a physical copy. So that chair is a copy of the real thing. Aristotle reads this and goes, oh my God, what a bunch of nonsense. What even is that? It's nonsensical. Aristotle says, no, the chair is a collection of essences. This chair is black, so it has black essence. It's plastic, so it has plastic essence. It's shaped in a specific way. It has chair essence. That a thing is a series of essences. Ibn Sina goes, those essences are actually information. For example, there might be a scratch on that chair. And then the shape of the chair itself is information. And the molecular construction, he didn't have the concept of molecules, but they did have the concept of atoms. The construction, the material in there, that's also information. But he takes it one step further. He goes, so when that chair was originally made, it was not perfect, but it was close to perfect because it probably didn't have any scratches on it. It didn't have any damage. It didn't have any wear and tear on it. But then, as time goes by, more information is added to the chair because it gets bumped and it gets scratched. In other words, there's a relationship between information and time. Take me, for example. When I was born, I was a lot easier to describe, in part because I was a lot smaller. But also I had fewer scars, and there was a lot less information in my head. So the description of me was really easy. But as time goes forward, the description of me becomes more and more complicated. Until finally, I die. And my cells break apart and decay back into the earth. The description of me becomes extraordinarily complicated at that point. In other words, as time goes by, the universe increases the amount of information. And then he goes, oh, wow. What if we ran the clock backwards? So instead of us thinking about the future where there's more information, if we go back, there's less and less information. And he goes, okay, so at some point we reach a moment where there's the minimum amount of information necessary for the universe itself to unravel from that moment. He calls that point in time and that information packet necessary being. In other words, 1,000 years ago, Ibn Sina described Big Bang and singularities and entropy. Also, that was not a major achievement for him. His real achievement was he's the guy who invented modern medicine.